You're at a dinner party. Someone mentions they don't have tattoos and never want one. The room goes quiet. Suddenly, they're the weird one. When did not wanting permanent ink become the thing that needs explaining? This isn't about judgment. It's about psychology. And the truth is way more interesting than you think. Everyone assumes people without tattoos are just scared. Scared of needles. Scared of pain. Scared of commitment. And sure, sometimes that's part of it. But here's where it gets complicated. Fear isn't the driving force for most people who avoid tattoos. It's something else entirely. When researchers actually ask people why they don't get tattoos, fear ranks surprisingly low. What ranks higher? A feeling they can't quite name. A sense that something about permanence feels wrong. Not morally wrong. Just misaligned with how they experience themselves. Think about it. Some people feel like the same person they were at 18. Others feel like they've been 5 different people since then. And that difference, it changes everything. Almost no one talks about this part. But it's the real starting point. Here's the insight. People who avoid tattoos often have a specific relationship with time. They see their future self as a stranger. Not in a bad way. Just in a realistic way. Psychologists call this temporal discounting of identity. It means you genuinely can't predict who you'll be in 10 years. So the idea of making a permanent choice for that stranger feels bizarre. Like buying clothes for someone you've never met. People with tattoos tend to feel more continuous across time. They trust their future self will still value what they value now. People without tattoos? They don't. They remember how much they've changed already. And they assume it'll keep happening. They look back at who they were 5 years ago and cringe. So they protect their future self from their current taste. Let's disrupt another assumption. People think tattoo-free folks are indecisive or commitment-phobic. But that's backwards. Many of them are more careful about commitments, not less. They take permanence seriously. Maybe too seriously. They're the people who agonize over paint colors for months. Who keep the same haircut because change feels risky. Who feel trapped by irreversible decisions. A tattoo isn't just ink. It's a door closing. And for some personalities, closing doors feels like losing options. Losing freedom. Losing future selves they haven't met yet. Here's where it gets complicated. This isn't about being afraid to commit. It's about being aware of what commitment costs. It's about understanding that every yes is also 1,000 no's. Almost no one talks about this part, but it's central to how these people think. Now flip it again. Some people avoid tattoos because they're quietly rebelling. Against what? Against the pressure to perform identity. Tattoos have become a language. They say I'm creative or I'm tough or I've survived something or I'm not like them. But what if you don't want to broadcast? What if you find the whole idea of wearing your identity on your skin exhausting? These people aren't judging tattoos. They're opting out of the conversation entirely. They see tattoos as performative, as trying too hard. And they'd rather let their personality speak without a visual script. They don't want to be read at first glance. They don't want their story told before they open their mouth. But that's not the real reason either. There's something deeper underneath. Something about control and presentation. Here's the psychological reveal. Some people are drawn to blankness. Not emptiness. Blankness. They like the feeling of being undefined. Of walking into a room and not being read immediately. Tattoos are data. They tell a story before you speak. And for certain personality types, that feels claustrophobic. They want space. Interpretive room. The freedom to be a different version of themselves depending on context. Psychologists call this self-concept flexibility. It's not about hiding who you are. It's about staying fluid. About refusing to freeze one version of yourself in time and space. These people value potential over declaration. Possibility over statement. They want to remain a question mark, not an exclamation point. Almost no one talks about this part. But it's a completely valid way to move through the world. And it explains so much. Disrupt this assumption. People think those without tattoos just don't care about their bodies. Wrong. Often they care intensely. But their care expresses itself differently. They might obsess over fitness, skincare, diet, posture. They see their body as something to maintain, not modify. Here's the insight. For some people, the body is a temple you preserve. For others, it's a canvas you decorate. Neither is better. But the psychology is different. Preservers feel like their body isn't fully theirs to alter. Like they're caretakers, not owners. Like they inherited something precious and their job is to protect it. Decorators feel the opposite. Ownership means creative control. It means making it yours through transformation. Almost no one talks about this split. But it explains why two people can both love their bodies and make completely opposite choices about them. Let's be honest. Some people avoid tattoos because they do judge them. Not out loud. Not aggressively. But quietly. They see tattoos and think, impulsive, attention-seeking, trying too hard. Here's where it gets complicated. That judgment often comes from deeper insecurity. From feeling like they themselves are too boring. Too safe. Too default setting. The tattoo becomes a mirror. It reflects back what they fear about themselves. That they play it safe. That they don't take creative risks. That they care too much what others think. So they criticize the tattoo to avoid criticizing themselves. This is uncomfortable to admit, but it's real. And recognizing it is the first step to letting it go. Almost no one talks about this part, but addressing it honestly is important. Because unexamined judgment hurts everyone involved. Here's another layer. People without tattoos are often hyper-aware of regret. Not because they regret more, but because they think about regret more. They run mental simulations constantly. What if I hate it in 5 years? What if I cringe every time I see it? What if it stops meaning what it means now? This isn't anxiety. It's a cognitive style. Psychologists call it maximizing versus satisficing. Maximizers agonize over decisions, always searching for the perfect choice. Satisficers pick something good enough and move on. Guess which group gets more tattoos? Here's the twist. Maximizers aren't happier. They just think they will be if they avoid regret. They believe caution protects them. But often, it just creates a different kind of regret. The regret of never taking the leap. Almost no one talks about this part. Disrupt this. People assume tattoos are about self-expression. But what if some people see identity as private? Not secret. Private. They believe the deepest parts of who they are shouldn't be on display. They value interiority, mystery, keeping something sacred by keeping it hidden. For them, a tattoo feels like giving away the ending of a book before someone reads it. It ruins the discovery process. This isn't snobbery. It's a different philosophy of self. Some people want to be known immediately. Others want to be discovered slowly. They believe the best parts of a person reveal themselves over time, through conversation, through behavior, through relationship, not through visual symbols. Almost no one talks about this distinction, but it cuts to the core of why some people say no. They're protecting something they consider precious. The right to be misunderstood until they're truly understood. Here's a reveal that's hard to admit. Some people just don't think tattoos look good. Not on anyone. Not even good tattoos. They see skin as already beautiful, already complete. To them, adding ink feels like graffiti on a finished painting. This isn't about taste being objective. It's about deeply held aesthetic instincts. And those instincts are often tied to how someone was raised. What art they were exposed to. What culture taught them was beautiful. Here's where it gets complicated. This aesthetic resistance is often unconscious. They don't choose to dislike tattoos. They just do. And they feel guilty about it. Like they're being judgmental when really it's just preference. Almost no one talks about this part. But aesthetic preferences are real. They're not moral judgments. And it's okay to have them as long as you don't impose them on others. Flip it again. Some people avoid tattoos because they like blending in. Not out of fear. Out of strategy. They see invisibility as power. In professional spaces, social spaces, family spaces, they want to be a chameleon. Tattoos are a flag, a signal, and signals limit your range. These people aren't boring. They're tactical. They've learned that being underestimated is an advantage. That not being immediately categorized gives them room to maneuver. They can move between worlds without friction. They can be whoever the situation needs them to be. Almost no one admits this, but it's a quiet form of social intelligence. And it's more common than you think. Here's the twist. This isn't about shame or hiding. It's about control. It's about choosing when and how you reveal yourself. About keeping your cards close until you decide to play them. Here's where it gets really interesting. For older generations, tattoos were rebellion. For younger generations, not having tattoos is becoming the rebellion. When everyone at the party has ink, the blank arm stands out. This creates a strange psychological loop. People who avoid tattoos now are doing what tattooed people used to do, refusing to conform. They're not anti-tattoo. They're anti-trend. They don't want to be part of the wave. They watched tattoos go from counterculture to mainstream and decided to stay off the train. Almost no one talks about this reversal, but it's happening right now, and it reveals something important. The psychology of no is often just the psychology of not everyone else. Identity is always relational, always reactive. We define ourselves as much by what we're not as by what we are. And in a world where tattoos are everywhere, being blank becomes its own statement. Here's the deepest layer. People who avoid tattoos often hold a specific philosophical belief, even if they've never said it out loud. I am not finished yet. They see themselves as unfinished, still becoming, still learning, still changing, and freezing any symbol, any image, any statement onto their skin feels like lying, like claiming to know who they are when they don't. This isn't insecurity. It's humility. It's the belief that identity is a process, not a product. That who you are is always emerging, never complete. They look at their body as a living document, not a finished manuscript. And they can't bring themselves to write something in permanent ink when they know the story is still unfolding. Almost no one talks about this part, but it's the quiet truth underneath everything else. And it's just as valid as any other way of being. So here's what we've uncovered. People without tattoos aren't boring, or scared, or judgmental. Well, sometimes they are. But mostly they're just wired differently. They experience time differently. They value privacy, blankness, flexibility, and control in ways that make permanent body modification feel misaligned. None of this makes them better or worse than people with tattoos. It just makes them different. And that's the point. The psychology of saying no is just as complex as the psychology of saying yes. Both are valid. Both are deeply human. The only mistake is assuming one is the default and the other needs justification. Neither does. They're just two ways of moving through the world. And both deserve to be understood. So next time someone says they don't want a tattoo, don't assume you know why. The answer is probably more interesting than you think.